All right, everybody, welcome to the Book Club of Enoch. Let me just get this microphone out of the way, but hopefully you can still hear me. Dang, this microphone might just be in my way today. Let me just check to see if y'all can hear me with this microphone real quickly. Let me just look on my phone and see if, uh, yeah, see if I can get this looking, see if it sounds right. Yeah, it's sounding all right. Yeah. So I am going to real quickly share this onto Facebook. But other than that, we're going to start getting started. So I apologize for that first minute having a little bit of a hiccup, but here we are. Welcome to the Book Club of Enoch. I am your host, Paxton Pritchett. It is an honor. If you're listening to this live, such an honor. If you're not listening to this live, but listening to it later, once again, such an honor that you would spend this next half hour to an hour, or even if you just listen to a few minutes of it with me. So yeah, it's been a little bit since we've been here. Life has been quite busy for me. I'm in my undergraduate degree right now at a university, and because of that, there's this happy, fun thing called homework. I'm being a little sarcastic, but it's also true. Fun little thing called homework. And so I have been super busy with that, super busy with work and just other stuff to where I just haven't had time. It's not what I prefer. I'd rather have done 2 episodes since the last time we've done one, but that's all right. We'll do one today, and then Lord willing, we will be back on our Monday 7 p.m. Central Time schedule starting next week. So before we begin, I know that it's been a crazy couple days here lately. It's been a lot of just dark things. We had Charlie Kirk, the political activist, the conservative activist, was shot and killed yesterday. All I'm going to say right here is, if you are in Christ listening to this, please do not have hate in your heart for people. Whoever did this, obviously, absolutely evil that they would do this. But please, love your enemy. And I don't mean that to endorse what he did. Obviously, I absolutely hate how some people are apparently celebrating this. But if you are in Christ, please do not have bitterness in your heart, even when someone does such an injustice. Instead, pray for the person, whoever did this evil thing, and also pray for Charlie Kirk's family. I would say that there is not a single person involved here who the believer should not be praying for. Us as Christians, I don't know the whole story. I don't even know a whole bunch about Charlie Kirk. But please, if you are in Christ, I implore you and beg, please pray for everyone involved, whether it be friends of the family, friends of whoever did this evil thing, anything involved. We as the body of Christ should be praying, even if you liked or didn't like any of the people involved. So apart from that, I say we get started with the Book Club of Enoch. So as per usual, we're going to go into our fun little mode where I share the screen. And when I share the screen, we get that fun little thing where it starts to weird zoom in like that. I love it. Kind of fun. And let's go over to PowerPoint. I think you all see my PowerPoint right here. Let me get it into a good presenter mode. And here we go. So the Book Club of Enoch. What we've been going at here recently is we've been going through chapters 6 through 11 of the Book of Enoch. If you're new to this channel, if you're new to this, the Book Club of Enoch is supposed to be like this, just weekly, just slow burning look into the Book of Enoch. We read it together, we ponder it. Just to clarify, I'm not an expert at the Book of Enoch. I'm not this person with a doctoral degree who has spent years of his life pondering it. I'm just a nerd. I'm more of a nerd. I'm not an expert. I'm a nerd for the Book of Enoch. But it's been fun doing research on it, and we'll be looking at people who are actually scholars who have spent time with the Book of Enoch, whether that's I don't know if I'd necessarily say that's always their main focus, but they're scholars who have looked into this. We'll be quoting them some. I'll be throwing out some ideas, And as usual, like, please feel free to comment in the comment section. Even if you disagree with me, I would definitely appreciate it if it's respectful. But like, if you see me just saying something that is just flat out you think that's wrong, like, please feel free to kind of politely just say rebuke me, so to speak. Politely say I disagree, or I'm pretty sure you're misrepresenting Enoch or the Bible, because I do not have this perfect. So we did First Enoch, chapters 1 through 5 these past couple weeks, and that was like that first prophecy. We talked about like Enoch opens with a prophecy, allegedly from Enoch himself, and it's in that prophecy that Jude quotes Enoch. You know, the book of Jude, written perhaps even by Jesus's brother, seems to quote the book of Enoch, and he quoted from that first chapter. And so we went through that, and then we went into chapters 6 through 11. Chapters 1 through 5, like we said, it seems to be, I've heard that it was what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of that first section. Then I've also heard that chapters 6 through, it might have been 16, is kind of like a second section or so. And we opened up by looking at the story from the Bible of the Nephilim. So chapter 6 is whenever we start getting into the iconic Enochic tale. You know, like when you think of the book of Enoch, you don't think about those first 5 chapters as much. You think about chapter 6. You think about this story, the myth, so to speak, or the narrative of angels coming down and having children with men. And we know that that seems to be based off of Genesis 6 right here. And just to read for review, Genesis 6 says, "Now it came about when men began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he also is flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. Then the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown." And so last week we looked how First Enoch looks at this story, and we talked about 3 different views of who those sons of God are. It's not been like every Christian or Jew throughout history has had an idea of who those sons of God were. We talked about 3 different views out there. These sons of God were either spiritual beings, they could have been sons of Seth, or they could have been kings. So we looked at Dr. Michael Heiser, and Dr. Michael Heiser is a really fascinating scholar. I don't necessarily agree with him on everything, but he has been very influential to my understanding of Enoch, and also to my understanding of even the Old Testament. And so he talks about each of the 3 views, and he comes to the conclusion of it being the spiritual view, that one right there, spiritual view. It's the view First Enoch takes, and Michael Heiser believes it's the view that the New Testament seems to take as well. And I think I agree with him that the New Testament really seems to look at the perspective. And I mean, you might be able to work some verses that seem to show it as a spiritual being's perspective, as being maybe like, you can maybe try to work around that to still believe in the sons of Seth view. But for me, if I was to like say, hey, I have to tell you what I believe right now, I'd say it's probably sons of God are spiritual beings, like the book of Enoch and perhaps what the New Testament is saying. So that's what we talked about last week. We also read through First Enoch 6, 7, and 8. It says 7 right there, but it's actually supposed to be 8. And this today. Today, I'm really excited for today, because today, unlike the other chapters, unlike the other times, today we actually have, I'm going to like have a title almost for this: Beauty, Knowledge, and Nephilim. Today is the day where we finally get into probably, like, if you were to think of one word related to the book of Enoch, there's a likely chance that it's the word Nephilim. Nephilim are these characters that we read about just a few minutes ago, first found in Genesis 6. And I believe the word Nephilim is only used twice in the Bible. I believe I read that somewhere. Both of them are in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. First one in Genesis 6, second one's like in Numbers or Deuteronomy. And so the word Nephilim is like not something we see often. But obviously they've captivated our imagination for a long time. And I think I'm really excited because today we actually get to dive into a little bit of them. So, fun quote to really begin us off. So, on the second, I think, live stream, I kind of quoted this, but I never told where it was from. And so I just want to go ahead and kind of make that right by giving, and I just realized I'm not in full mode. There we go. That's better. I just want to go ahead and quote this. I talked about it a little bit on the second live stream, but I actually want to now actually give you where I would have gotten that from. And it was something Michael Heiser said in his book, Reversing Herman. He says, most Christians and Christian leaders know next to nothing about First Enoch. Few have read the book. This book was written in 2017, so I think that might have changed a little bit by now. But I will say that is one thing that I'm really excited about for this live stream is we're going to be diving into the book of Enoch. And I think that even though I don't believe that the book of Enoch is canon, and I believe it can be used wrongly, it can be used in a way that maybe is to quote unquote conspiracy theory, quote unquote. And I'm using that in quote unquote because I acknowledge I'm sure some things that people have claimed to be conspiracy, other people actually find out to be true. So I'm not trying to like throw conspiracy theories under the bus, but I'm also not endorsing them either. I'm just saying though that sometimes though the book of Enoch can be used in a way that I think is not proper. And it can either be used in a way that like gives too much emphasis on the book, and it can also be used in a way that gives too much hatred for the book. And so I just I'm really excited that together we can learn more about it. And I think try to come up with try to see a healthy way of looking into it from a Christian perspective. So today we're going to be looking at chapters 6, 7, 8, and 9. And so we're going to reread chapters 6, 7, 8, and 9. And then we're going to look at 3 different ideas found in there. Idea number 1 is the idea of beauty. We're going to see beauty displayed. And we're going to see how beauty can actually be a tool from the enemy sometimes when it's misused. We're then going to look at them and see knowledge. We're going to see how in the story of First Enoch, knowledge doesn't always equal good things. You know, it can be easy to think about knowledge as being like the end all be all. And that if we only have enough knowledge, we can be saved. I think a few weeks ago, a good friend of mine was preaching a sermon and he really talked about this, like this idea of like this false gospel of human knowledge and like how if we can only gain enough knowledge, we could have salvation. We could be perfect if we only knew enough. And I think that stories like Enoch and even the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve can be like warnings to this idea of a gospel of knowledge, because knowledge in and of itself isn't always good. It's knowledge united to God is where it becomes good. And so then we're going to also look at Nephilim, the Nephilim. We're going to have a little introduction to them. We're going to read about them. We're going to read some quotes that people have about them and other stuff as well. So to begin off with First Enoch chapter 6, and this is the R.H. Charles translation, which was, I believe, published in the early 1900s. It's the version we're going to be using because I do not know how copyright works for the versions that are copyrighted, but this one is in the public domain. So without further ado, First Enoch chapter 6. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And Semjaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind to ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then swear they all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were in all 200, who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon, And they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And these are the names of their leaders: Simiazas, which I would apologize to Simiazas, but I do not know if he exists. And if he does exist and the book of Enoch's true, then, or at least has some truth in it, he's probably in a prison right now, a spiritual prison. I'm kind of joking, but I really do not know how to pronounce this guy's name. Simiazas, their leader. Arikabah, Ramael, Kokabel, Tamiel, Ramiel, Daniel, Ezekiel, Badargiel, Asael, Amaros, Batarel, Ananel, Zachiel, Sansapiel, Satariel, Turiel, Jamjael, Sariel. These are the chiefs of tens. So here in chapter 6, we have the sons of God, the angels of heaven, looking at these beautiful women in this pre-flood world, and they lust after them, and they decide to go down and have children with them. And so they make an agreement, a pact, that they're going to actually do this together. It's not just going to be one going down and the rest bailing on him. They're all going to go do this sin together. They know it's wrong already, yet they go down and do it. This leads us to chapter 7. Chapter 7 says, "And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one, and they began to go in unto them, and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments, and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones." So here in chapter 7, we seem to see that they have kids. These angels have kids with these human women, and they teach these human women, their wives, certain knowledge that they did not know beforehand. And then their children, though, become these chaotic monsters. They're giants who do evil things. They sin against both man and animals. This leads us to chapter 8. "And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth, and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways. Sinjaza taught enchantments and root cuttings, Armaros the resolving of enchantments, Barachiel taught astrology, Kokabel the constellations, Ezekiel the knowledge of the clouds, Arachiel the signs of the earth, Shamsiel the signs of the sun, and Sariel the course of the moon. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven." So here we see that they come down. These angels come down. They have children with human women. Their children, the children of the angels and the women, are these chaotic giants who do so much evil against nature and humans. And then we also see that the angels teach humanity knowledge that they did not know before. And this knowledge, a lot of the things are evil. They teach them astrology and occultic magic, and even things that we may not think on the surface, at least today, sound bad, such as swords and knives and shields and breastplates. But that seems to be stuff of war. And even like the beautifying of the eyelids, that's a very fascinating one. That in this ancient text, the idea is that that comes from angels coming down to earth, teaching women about certain things like the beautifying of the eyelids. And we see that just so much evil comes about. It says at the end of chapter 8, "And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven." There's injustice and there is evil happening to these people. They cry, and their cry goes up to heaven. So From these 3 chapters we read, I want to focus on 3 specific things. And that is beauty, knowledge, and a little bit on the Nephilim. So one thing that we see here is that all of this happens in the story because the sons of God think the daughters of men are beautiful. Now, that doesn't mean it's the daughters of men's fault. I'm not trying to say that necessarily. In Enoch, it seems the blame, especially at the beginning, seems to be on the angels. Anyways, some texts actually hold some blame. Some ancient texts hold blame on the women for seducing them, I think I've heard, but I don't think First Enoch does that. But one thing that we can learn as a moral of this story, and I'm not saying that those who wrote down First Enoch were thinking of this, but this is just something that when I read this, I find fascinating, and that is beauty. So beauty is a good thing. It is given by God, but beauty can be misused because what the enemy does, the enemy takes the good things, the good gifts of God, and he abuses them. And when he does that, he can turn them into bad things. And one of these is beauty. So when beauty is misused, I'd love to look at this with Eve and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, then the sons of God and the daughters of men, and then look at it with us today. So Adam and Eve, we have the story of Adam and Eve where Adam's placed in the garden and he's told he can eat from any tree, but there's one tree he can't eat from, and that is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So what does Eve do? So when Eve's in the garden, the snake comes to him and tempts her to eat from this tree. And it says in one of the verses in chapter 3, when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and then I underlined it here, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate. And she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. The tree was beautiful. Is it wrong for the tree to be beautiful? Absolutely not. But just because it was beautiful doesn't mean it was Eve's to have. It was something that she could recognize as beautiful, but from a distance. And this has so many implications for us today. But what we see here is that a tree that God made that was beautiful, Eve misused and sinned in an attempt to get to that beauty. God makes so many things beautiful, but beautiful things, whether it be concepts such as sexuality or marriage, whether it be beauty such as an enjoyment, such as enjoying food, whether it be any of these beautiful pleasures and beautiful things that God has made, they can be good, but they must be used in their proper contexts. Because when they're not used in their context, Satan likes to take those beautiful things of God and take them down and give it to us in the wrong context, in the wrong ways. And when that happens, it becomes sin. And so Eve finds this tree beautiful and she eats of it. She does what she's not supposed to do. But this also isn't just in the story of Adam and Eve. It's also in First Enoch with the angels looking down at the daughters of men. And it seems to be in Genesis as well. So in Genesis 6:2, it says, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. So while it doesn't necessarily directly say that's bad in Genesis 6, I think from the full context of Scripture, we know that this was a bad thing for them to do. And just when we look at it from the Enochic perspective, we also see it as being bad. I've heard from the Bible Project that word for beautiful right there in Genesis 6:2 is the same as the word for good. It's the same as the word for good, like in Genesis chapter, I think 1, when God said, and it was good. And it might even be the same. Don't quote me on this, but I wonder if it's the same as in this verse whenever it says it was good for food. I'll have to check back on that one. But they saw that the women were beautiful, and it was true. They were beautiful. But when they saw they were beautiful, they then decided that it was worth sinning to achieve that pleasure than to follow the ways of God. And we see this in 1 Enoch 6, 1-2. It says, and it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them and said to one another, "Come, let us choose wives from among the children of men and beget us children." They saw that they were beautiful. And when they saw that they were beautiful, they decided it was worth sinning to have them. That leads us to us today. What I love about this moral we can find in Enoch and this idea that we find in the story of Adam and Eve is that God has created so many things that are beautiful. God has created so many things that are pleasurable. He's such a good creator. But what God created beautiful things are we misusing? Just because something is beautiful or pleasing does not mean it is for us to have. Pardon, this will get a little more PG-13 rated for a second, but I mean, the obvious example of this is sexuality, sex. Sex is a beautiful thing that God created, but he created it for a certain context. And that's the context of marriage between a man and a woman. It's a beautiful thing, but Satan looks at this beautiful thing called sex and he decides to warp it and misuse it. And he wants it to give us it in a way that doesn't follow God's way, whether that be premarital sex or other things. There's other examples too, like food. Food's a much less PG-13 example, but it's also important. Food is a beautiful thing. Food is a delicious thing. Food is a pleasurable thing that God created for us to have. But just because it's beautiful, and that's not bad, but what happens though is that Satan takes it and turns it into gluttony. He turns what's good, and that is the idea of eating food and enjoying it and seeing it as like a gift from God. He takes it and turns it into something bad, which is gluttony, which is I will have more than I need or more than that's healthy for me or more than what is proper and profitable to have. And when we do that, we sin. I'm not the first to say this, and I'm sure I got this from somewhere else, but like gluttony really is one of the secret sins. And I'm saying that as someone who struggles with it, someone who likes to eat too much many times. So Satan twists beauty. And I have down here like Morgoth. I'm going to get to nerd out with y'all for a minute. So what I'm about to say, I am not the first to come up with. I think a really fascinating YouTuber named Inspiring Philosophy talked a little bit about this in a video called basically, it was about Tolkien. I don't remember the name, but Inspiring Philosophy is an apologetics channel. And they have a video about J.R.R. Tolkien and just the way the theological framework, the philosophical framework of his world. So I think they talk about it there. I'm sure they talk about it other places. But in J.R.R. Tolkien, the guy who wrote The Lord of the Rings, he has this myth of this villain named Morgoth. And Morgoth is like the devil figure of Middle Earth. He is the bad guy. He is the ultimate bad guy, so to speak. And he is quite literally a fallen angel. He's a fallen heavenly being. And so Morgoth in the book The Silmarillion, which is like the Genesis account, so to speak. I've heard it almost, which is like a Genesis account of sorts, or an origin story of Middle Earth, of the Lord of the Rings universe. Morgoth, what he does is he comes to Earth, and what he does is he creates these beings called orcs. But to do that, what he does is he takes these beautiful beings called elves, who are called children of Iluvatar, which is the name of God. Iluvatar is the name of Middle Earth's God. The children of Iluvatar, he takes them, the elves, and he warps them and turns them into the evil orcs, into bad guys, basically. And so a friend of mine pointed this out, and many people have, is that Morgoth, the main villain of Middle Earth of those early years, he can't create anything new. He doesn't have the power to create. He has the power to warp. And I think that there's a lot of reality to that. And I would argue that Satan is the same way. Satan doesn't create something. He warps what God has created. Like I said, I'm probably not the first person to say that, so I don't know necessarily who to give credit to for that, but I think that this principle is true. Just as in the Middle Earth story, Morgoth, the Dark Lord, he didn't create bad guys. He didn't create an army. He took the beautiful thing that basically God created, and he turned that into evil. And in a similar way, Satan in the real world, he turns beautiful things that were created by God, and he takes them and twists them, and he wants us to help him twist them into evil things. And I would say Satan wins when we misuse good things. Now, I put wins in parentheses because he does win the battle, but let's be honest, we know that Satan has not won the war and will not win the war. He, through the cross, has been just broken. He has lost, and he will lose in the end. But he can win, so to speak, little battles here and there. And he does this whenever we misuse good things, whether it's food, whether it is relationships. Perhaps a good example of this might be like you have just a big attraction to someone, but it's not meant to be. Maybe this person has said no to you many times, or maybe this is someone that is like someone that you know you're not supposed to. Maybe they're not a Christian. If you're a Christian and you're attracted to someone that's not a Christian, yes, they're beautiful. That's a God-given thing, but they aren't for you. And for us to pursue someone that's not a Christian would be like the angels pursuing the daughters of men, because it wasn't meant to be, because that goes against God's created order. And God's created order is that believers marry believers. It would be like the creation of the orcs in Middle Earth, because the enemy is taking something good, and that is beauty, relationships, marriage, but he's twisting it because he was trying to get a believer to marry someone who's a non-believer. And so that's something just I'd love for us, that I really find fascinating about the book of Enoch, and even in Genesis and in our own lives, that the enemy twists beauty and turns beauty into evil. So that's one thing we can find in these passages in Enoch and in the Bible. But another thing is knowledge. Notice here in these verses of the book of Enoch that the angels come down and they teach knowledge. Like we talked about earlier, a good friend of mine preached a message, and in it he preached against I believe, I could be totally making up, he might not have actually preached about it, but I think he did. The gospel of knowledge, so to speak. This good news that like if we only have enough knowledge, we will be perfect. We will be like happy, and we will be saved. And so I just want to use this as a moment that in the book of Enoch, and I think in Genesis, we have this idea that not all knowledge is good, or at least not all knowledge is always used good. That might be a better way to say it. Knowledge is a great thing. The ability to learn more is beautiful. And in many ways, God wants us to increase in our knowledge. If you're in Christ, Christ is the treasure of wisdom and knowledge. He has the full treasury of wisdom and knowledge. But what's so important is that knowledge must be gotten in a healthy way. Knowledge must be gotten and be received, not without God. Knowledge plus God is good. Knowledge void of God, that's whenever it can get a little dangerous. And I'm a little not really saying it too well, and part of me feels like I don't even know what I'm saying. So like we'll work through this. But first, a little coffee break. Thank you. So we see this, though, this idea of knowledge being misused, just as beauty is misused. Knowledge can be misused as well. Knowledge is a beautiful gift. But knowledge, whenever it says, all right, God, step aside, I want to use knowledge my way, that leads to disaster. We see this with Eve and the tree. What was the tree? It was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Eve grasped for knowledge whenever she was not supposed to at that moment. And when she and Adam did this, so much chaos ensued. And we see the same with the Watchers in the book of Enoch. Whether based off a true story or not, it tells a story that has a fascinating moral lesson, and that is these angels, they come down and they teach humanity knowledge that humanity was not supposed to have. And because of this, so much chaos emerges. And we can also look at us today and ask, what ways are we grasping for knowledge that may not be God glorifying? So even the tree, once again, the same verse that we had earlier, when the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was a delight to the eyes and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate. And she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. So here we see the tree was going to give them knowledge. There would be a positive thing, positive as in they gained something, if they ate from the tree. And that would be knowledge. Doesn't that sound great? Isn't knowledge good? Knowledge is good, but there's one problem. God said no. God said no to them eating from this tree. Why did he say no? That's a great question. Some may speculate that they weren't ready to eat from this tree. Perhaps they had more maturing to do. Perhaps God put it there mainly to give them a choice, whether or not to love God by choosing to eat from the tree of life or say no to God by eating from something else. Either way, whatever it is, God said no. And at the end of the day, that's enough for us, right? That when God says no, we say, yes, sir. So God said no, and they ate anyways. They gained knowledge when God at this moment didn't want them to gain this knowledge. And what happened? So much chaos and evil and death ensued. The Watchers and their wisdom, these angelic beings in the book of Enoch, like I said, whether you think the book of Enoch is based on a true story or not, we have in the book of Enoch this story of angels coming down and spreading knowledge to humanity. But this knowledge doesn't lead to good. This knowledge leads to evil, which makes you wonder if sometimes knowledge isn't good to have. I'm not saying that's necessarily the case always, or even most of the time, but could it be that there is a knowledge that's not good to have? Just as it was not good for Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And just as it was not good for the Watchers to share this knowledge with humanity. I don't know. That's a good question. I think ultimately it's when God says no to us receiving a certain type of knowledge, whenever we jump anyways on it, that's when it gets bad. So here it says, and I think this is chapter 7 or 8. It says, and Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony. And I still don't know what antimony is. I'll have to look that up. And the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all coloring tinctures. What a fun word, tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupted in all their ways. Simjaza taught enchantments and root cuttings. Armaros, the resolving of enchantments. Barakiel taught astrology. Kokabel, the constellations. Ezekiel, the knowledge of the clouds. Arakiel, the signs of the earth. Shamsiel, the signs of the sun. And Sariel, the course of the moon. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven. So in Reversing Herman, a book written by Dr. Michael Heiser, he writes this about this incident of the angels teaching women and humanity knowledge in the book of Enoch. He says, while human rebellion first appeared in Eden, it is the actions of the Watchers that served as a catalyst to spread wickedness among humanity, like a spiritual contagion. They are held responsible for teaching humans a variety of things that engendered lust, warfare, astrology, occult practices, etc. Like I said earlier, I'm not saying that the book of Enoch is a true story. So maybe this is just a made-up story. But even if it's a made-up story, in the story, we have this moral lesson of like the danger of some knowledge. Because what we see here, it seems that according to Michael Heiser, because they gave this teaching to humanity, humanity used it and just evil ensued. Evil ensued because angels taught humans certain knowledges. At least that's what Heiser seems to be getting at. We then have here in chapter, I believe it's chapter 9 of the book of Enoch, God says, and that all the children of men may not perish through all the secret things that the watchers have disclosed and have taught their sons. And the whole earth has become corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. So we see here that because of the knowledge of this evil angel who comes down and spreads knowledge to humanity, what does the book of Enoch say? It calls it, what does it say? The idea of that says the children of men may not perish. That means children of men could perish because of this knowledge and because of what the watchers have disclosed and have taught to their sons. And so the whole earth has become corrupted. How? Through the works that were taught by Azazel. So in the story of the book of Enoch, we see a danger of knowledge. When knowledge is misused, it can lead to so much evil stuff. What about us today? Does knowledge equal success? That's a great question. Excuse me. Does knowledge equal success? At the end of the day, I'd say no. You know, what does it say in, I think, 1 Corinthians? Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. Knowledge is a beautiful thing. Acquiring information is a beautiful thing. But by itself, without love, by itself, without a heart that says, I want to serve God, it can be a very dangerous thing. You know, I truly think it is better, and I could be wrong, but I think it is so much better to be a man who doesn't have much knowledge, but loves Jesus, than to be a man who just knows everything, but doesn't love Jesus. It's better to be someone who's more ignorant, but has a heart that says, I want to do good, than to be a man who has so much knowledge, enough knowledge to just change the world, but without the hope of the gospel. Knowledge in and of itself doesn't get you to heaven, knowing the right stuff. Knowledge in and of itself doesn't make the world a better place. It's the character behind the people that use the knowledge that can help make the world a better place. It's whenever they have faith in God and they use that knowledge, that's where it's at. We see a reminder in James 3, this idea that wisdom isn't always a good thing. He talks about godly wisdom and demonic wisdom in James 3. It says this wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but is earthly, natural, demonic. So there's such a thing as demonic wisdom. There's such a thing as knowledge that you probably shouldn't have right now. And so the question is, how are we going to use knowledge? Are we going to, as humans, and especially the church, are we going to try to think of our value from our knowledge? Are we going to try to gain knowledge perhaps in a way that's not good, whatever that means? Are we going to try to think we know what's best and think that our knowledge is better than God's commands? Or are we going to filter our knowledge through God's nature? Are we going to use the knowledge we've been given and use it with a heart that loves Jesus and use that for the good? So knowledge in and of itself a lot of times can be like a weapon. It's like a tool. And will we use that tool or weapon for good or evil? And so that's, I think, a big thing that we can see in Enoch is that knowledge can be used for evil. We also saw that in the Genesis with Eve. We have the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And Eve uses the knowledge in a bad way in that she takes it and eats from it. And so does Adam. Eve was deceived, Paul said. But Adam, he rebelled against God. So, all right, let's talk the Nephilim to end off today. We talked about beauty and how beauty is misused. It can bring about chaos. We talked about knowledge and how knowledge, when it's misused, can bring about chaos. Now the Nephilim. So we saw in chapter 7, chapter 7 of Enoch, the birth of the giants that come from the Watchers. It says, and they became pregnant and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. Then what does it say? Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. So there we have this look at the giants that came from the unholy matrimony, so to speak, or the unholy union and intercourse of angels and women. And so a few thoughts on this. So Nicholsburg, Dr. Michael Heiser quotes Nicholsburg, and Nicholsburg, I think, writes a commentary on the Book of Enoch. And so Dr. Michael Heiser quotes him about these giants. And Nicholsburg says some fascinating thoughts right here. He says on page 186 of his book, throughout these verses, they are the subjects of a series of verbs denoting their lawless and unrestrained gluttony, as they seek to satisfy their ravenous and insatiable appetites. They are no mere warriors. They slaughter human beings in order to devour them in the place of the food they do not supply. Then they turn on the animal world, which was forbidden as food in the pre-Diluvian world. Genesis 1, 29 through 30 and 9, 2 through 3 are what Nicholsburg gives for that idea. To the Gacalog, that's a great word. It's probably supposed to be catalog, but I don't know. I probably typed that in wrong. To the catalog of animals in Genesis 6, 7 are added the fish. The whole animal kingdom, clarified Genesis 1:26, is the object of their violence. Then, as a logical and inevitable conclusion, they begin to cannibalize one another. As a climax to the description, the author adds, and they drank the blood. Excuse me. In the eyes of a Jew, the ultimate abomination and violation of created life. We can see this in Genesis 9, 5 through 6, according to Nicholsburg. So according to Nicholsburg, it's like these giants that are produced from the union of angels and men. What they do is they are violent, chaotic creatures, and they kill humans. And whenever humans can't get them any more food, they start eating the humans. And then they start sinning, and perhaps that means eating the animals as well. And then they start eating and killing each other. And so we just find evil upon evil upon evil coming from these giants. And then this leads us to chapter 9 of the book of Enoch. And in chapter 9, so the cry in chapter 8 goes up to heaven, this cry about the violence that these evil creatures are doing. And it comes up to heaven. And in chapter 9, we have these angels. They talk about it and they pray to God. They pray to God that he would come and, let's see. I have a weird little thing that came up and said Microsoft PowerPoint would like to access the camera. I don't know why it's saying that, but we'll say, okay. Hopefully that doesn't do anything bad to what we're doing so far. So basically, chapter 9, we're going to see the call and prayer of these angels to God to help to fight, I guess, on behalf of the innocent. So in chapter 9, verse 1, it says, and then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from heaven and saw much blood being shed upon the earth, and all lawlessness being wrought upon the earth. And they said to one another, the earth made without inhabitant cries the voice of theirs crying up to the gates of heaven. And now to you, the holy ones of heaven, the souls of men make their suit, saying, bring our cause before the Most High. And they said to the Lord of the ages, Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings, and God of the ages, the throne of thy glory standeth unto all the generations of the ages, and thy name holy and glorious, blessed unto all the ages. Thou hast made all things, and power over all things hast thou. And all things are naked and open in thy sight. And thou seest all things, and nothing can hide itself from thee. Thou seest what Azazel hath done, who hath taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. And send Jaza, to whom thou hast given authority to bear rule over his associates. And they have gone to the daughters of men upon the earth, and have slept with the women, and have defiled themselves, and revealed to them all kinds of sins. And the women have borne giants, and the whole earth has thereby been filled with blood and unrighteousness. And now behold, the souls of those who have died are crying and making their suit to the gates of heaven, and their lamentations have ascended and cannot cease, because of the lawless deeds which are wrought on the earth. And thou knowest all things before they come to pass, and thou seest these things, and thou dost suffer them, and thou dost not say to us what we are to do to them in regard to these. And so that's the end of chapter 9. What is in this story, whether you think it's fictional or has a seed of reality, what is God, the character God, going to say? That will be in chapter 10, which will be what we talk about either next week. I think next week, yeah. Starting next week, we're going to go into it. I'm really excited. We're going to be talking about some fascinating stuff in chapter 10. So what did we talk about today? Well, today we talked about, where is it? Today we talked about beauty, knowledge, and Nephilim. If you're new here, just now joining in, just to recap as we end off this video today, we talked about in chapters 6 through 9, this idea of the angels coming down, having children with men, something that was forbidden, and teaching them what seems to be forbidden knowledge. We can learn from this story that beauty, when misused, can lead to evil, chaotic things. God created things to be beautiful, whether they're other humans, whether it's just this pleasure of food or art or anything. Beauty is a true thing and pleasure is a true thing, but it can be misused. Both of those things can be misused by us whenever we don't work in them God's way. The same with knowledge. They taught humans knowledge, but this knowledge led to so much evil. They weren't supposed to teach these humans this knowledge in the book of Enoch. But the angels did, and it leads to so much chaos. And we can look at our own lives and ask, how are we misusing knowledge? How are we not being good stewards of knowledge? And really one of the best ways to be a steward of the knowledge you have, one, filter it through the Bible. Filter it through Jesus's reality. But also, always keep God in the loop. Pray to God and let him be your focus, not your knowledge. And therefore, hopefully, by leaning on Jesus, by leaning on his nature and his character, hopefully through God, you can use the knowledge you've been given wisely. The third thing we talked about is the giants, who I think are later either called Nephilim, or there's the idea that the Nephilim are the children of the giants that they did. Running out of battery. Yeah, I got to end this very soon before it heads off. So, hope y'all had a great time. Thank y'all so much for joining us. Yes. Love others, man. Love your enemies. Love the church. And love God. We will see y'all next time. Y'all have a wonderful day.